Hello everyone, welcome to the course Inside Chinese Culture. In this session, we will focus on the agricultural advances in ancient China. Ancient Chinese emperors carried out many initiatives to develop agriculture, which was the largest sector of the economy at that time. Master Lu's Spring and Autumn Annals describes how each spring the emperor and his chief ministers initiated the growing season with a ceremony in which each took turns plowing the ground. The plows they used were dramatically superior to the plows used in Europe until the 18th century. This tradition of initiation of the growing season passed down for generations. And this is Emperor Yongzheng's initiation of growing season. We can see plows here. Apart from that, governments actively promoted the development of new technologies in agriculture and often took initiatives to ensure their use by the farmers. Over 500 tracts were produced. These tracts covered a wide range of crops, techniques, and technologies necessary to develop productivity, such as plowing, sowing, irrigation, and cultivation. In this session, we will focus on 3 agricultural inventions in ancient China: the cast iron plow, seed drill, and row cultivation. First, cast iron plow. Previously, we mentioned that ancient China was pretty advanced in iron casting. With cast iron, we no longer needed to hammer tools one at a time, but we could easily replicate plows from a mold. This led to the wide use of cast iron plows, which contributed to the advance in agriculture. Of all the advantages we had for centuries over the rest of the world, the greatest was perhaps the superiority of the plows. The plow represents one of the major agricultural inventions in human history. Plows prepare the ground for planting by using an iron shear to cut into the ground and a curved moldboard to turn it, burying the weeds and loosening the soil. The Chinese plow concentrated the force much more efficiently on the sharp blade of the plow, with the moldboard designed to turn the soil with a minimum of drag. With the European plow, the entire straight wooden moldboard pushed against the soil. Therefore, the Chinese plow accomplished more work with less effort. Chinese plows were so efficient that they required only one animal to pull them. So Robert Temple commented in his book, The Genius of China, that nothing underlines the backwardness of the West more than the fact that for thousands of years, millions of human beings plowed the earth in a manner which was so inefficient, so wasteful of effort, and so utterly exhausting, that this deficiency of sensible plowing may rank as mankind's single greatest waste of time and energy. Then we come to seed drill. With the use of plows, the ground is ready for planting. At first, the seeds were placed by hand in furrows, in a ridge and furrow pattern. Around the 2nd century BC, the Chinese introduced the seed drill, which became almost universally used in northern China. The drill was pulled along behind the ox or mule and dribbled the seed at a controlled rate into straight rows. This device consisted of small plows that cut small furrows in the ground, a mechanism that released the seeds evenly spaced into these furrows, and a brush or roller that covered the seeds with dirt. The seed drill could be adjusted for different types of soil and seeds. This method of planting was so much more efficient than sowing the seed by scattering it, that it could achieve efficiency 10 or even 30 times greater. The first seed drill was introduced to Europe in 16th century. Before that, Europeans sowed the seeds by hand, which was very wasteful. A painting by the Lindbergh brothers demonstrates the inefficiency of the methods for planting that were used in Europe until the 18th century. In the lower right-hand corner, a farmer tosses seeds from a sack he carries onto the ground. Behind him, another farmer is riding a horse that is pulling a rake. The purpose of the rake was to cover the seeds with soil, a very unreliable method that left many seeds exposed. Pictured in the lower left is a flock of birds busy eating the seeds. This method was so inefficient that most of the seeds never had a chance to produce a crop. The plants also grew up in a disorganized mess. Weeding the fields was impossible, so the plants were left to compete with the weeds until harvest season. This considerably reduced the crop. The Chinese plow and seed drill were introduced into Europe later and gradually adopted throughout Europe. The next is row cultivation. Not only did ancient Chinese use advanced tools in agriculture, but also they used advanced methods. Row crop farming was one of them. Growing crops in rows and taking care to weed them thoroughly may seem to us to be obvious and necessary process. But they were not practiced in Europe until the 18th century. Ancient Chinese were doing this at least by the 6th century BC. Ancient Chinese realized that if the seeds were planted in separate rows, the plants could be irrigated more effectively and the weeds could be chopped down with a hoe. When the horizontal rows and the vertical rows were made with skill, the lines were straight, the wind would pass gently through, and the crop would mature rapidly because they would not interfere with each other's growth. This greatly increased the crop yields. It should be easy to see that the difference in productivity between Chinese and European agriculture was dramatic. Chinese yields have been estimated at 2, 5, or even 10 times higher than yields in Europe at various times. China's higher yields allowed for an increased population density and also for an increased division of labor. Eventually, these technologies were transmitted to Europe, which led to a big increase in agricultural production. European travelers were greatly impressed with the wealth of China and the productivity of its agriculture. Europeans who traveled to China brought back information on Chinese science, industry, and agriculture. Okay, that is all about the major agricultural advances in ancient China. See you next time.